Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the FYP, the For Your Period podcast. Today, we've got a super juicy topic. Our resident FAM expert, Sarah, is going to take us through the ins and outs of the Fertility Awareness Method. And I brought my notebook and my pencil because I am ready to take notes and go straight to school today. So welcome back, everybody. Sarah, I can't wait. Before we dive in there, let's do a quick cycle check-in. Where is everybody at with their cycle today?
We all pull up our phones to look at what day of the cycle we're on.
Yes, I think I'm like day 23, day 22. Yep.
Day 22. How are you feeling on day 22?
I'm feeling very day 22. My feelings are like everything is, everything everybody does is because they hate my guts and they don't want to be my friend anymore. So that's where I'm at today.
Tell that inner mean girl that's not true and it will pass.
Oh, girl, ain't nobody thinking about you like that. Let's just start there. Yeah, but you know how it goes.
It's hard to convince day 22 of that, though. It's really hard.
Yeah.
We love you and all of your lutealness.
Thank you. You guys still want to be my friends?
Absolutely.
Yes, even though I'm day 22. Okay, good. Okay. What about you, Alex?
So I would be on day 27, but I've been begging my period to start all weekend. I'm just like talking to my uterus and just like begging it to start because we're traveling this week for work. And I'm like it would more likely have started on like Tuesday or Wednesday. And I'm just like, please don't do that. I'm supposed to be on a plane. I'm supposed to be on a plane. So like I wiped this morning and it was some bright red. So like not the little brown spotting because I had a little brown. I was like, okay, so this begging my uterus thing is working. So I think it's starting today, but then I put one of the OB supplements in. So the MyAmma, they're in our the Cyclical Business Collective. So I was getting pretty crampy this morning and I had like the red wipes. And then I put one of those in and I have had no more blood. I'm like, what's happening? Did this stop my period? I'll be mad if it stopped stop the pain, but stop my period. I mean, I want that. So weird, cool. It instantly started working.
Really? Like what was the sensation? Was it just the absence of cramps or was it like
I felt like it was like melting away, like a melting away of like the discomfort is how I would describe it.
Explain for the listeners what the active ingredient is.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so the OB it is a CBD suppository that you just right up your vagina or your rectum if you're feeling real spicy. That's what they said. I was like, I'm not sure I'm there yet. But you can use it either vaginally or rectally for period pain, cramps, really good for endometriosis. But it has high levels of CBD. And so, no, you do not get high from your vagina. This is not a boofing endorsement, but it's just it just takes the pain away. And so I was having that kind of heavy, kind of crampy first day feeling. And then it's it's still just gone. And it's we're hours.
We're going to have to link them in the show notes. Yeah.
Yes.
We're going to have to link them in the show notes. That sounds magical.
Good stuff. Yeah. So that's, I guess, maybe day 1 or day 27, kind of depending on what continues to happen as the day progresses.
I hate that when I'm journaling, when I write day 28 and then the next day is day 2. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm not a liar. I just really started later on in the day.
Yeah. There's always that question mark when you get to that point in the cycle. I'm on day 20. And so I'm kind of in I'm in the happy medium. These ladies know that last week I was in the lull after ovulation. And that's not always a very fun place for me. I honestly think it's worse than when I get close to my period. I don't know why. I'm just really sensitive to those drop in hormones. But like I was telling Alex earlier, I had a nice, calm, family-focused weekend. And I got to spend a lot of time in my kitchen. And I was using my luteal phase superpowers. And I put all the fall stuff away, away. And just started thinking about the wintry decorations. I want to do it now when I'm in the mood to do it, because then I'm going to get into my next cycle and then I'd be like, yeah, that's nice. But I also don't care enough what my house looks like until I get to my next luteal phase. But at that point, it's going to be almost Christmas already.
It's almost over. Yeah.
luteal phase superpowers, friends. Like,
decorate your house.
yeah, the luteal phase
I
gets
love
such a bad rap. Like, yes, it can be hard, but there's so many things that can help us feel better when we know like what's going on with our body. Like I actually love my luteal phase most of
I
the
do
time.
too. I'm
Even
super
when,
honest and
yeah,
productive and not emotionally attached to the outcomes of conversations. Like, yeah,
yes.
that sucks, and I'm gonna go read a book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Things
Yeah,
I never thought I would be like this. Even when I
me
first started the
either.
agenda period, I knew about the luteal phase and I was like, fuck this phase. Now I love it. I did the same thing with
It's like
my
harnessing.
Yeah.
yeah, like how do you wrangle this energy for your own benefit? And it feels like really clear and obvious how you wrangle ovulation, but it can feel a little bit trickier to do with luteal phase. But once you do it, once you lock in there, like gold
Magic.
mine.
Yeah.
I did the undecorating last week because I was like, these Halloween decorations have been up for a week after Halloween and we need to get them down. And my husband's like, okay. I was like, they're going down today. You take that stuff down, I'll take this. And he was like, yes, ma'am. Okay, where do you want this out? I was like, because I cannot look at them another minute more. And like it got down like right, and I was like, oh, thank God. I just could not look at the hanging little ghosties that we had up there. I was like, they needed to
Oh.
be down right now.
Well, I'm
Yes.
He's
so
like,
fired up to put up
okay.
our tree. Like, I think my husband's taking the stuff down from the attic either today when he gets home or tomorrow. So I want it done before we go on our trip, because when we come back, I'm
Yay.
probably going to be like hours away from starting my period, and I'll miss the window. I'll
There
miss
you
the
go.
window.
Missed the window.
Yeah.
So
But
just
y'all,
gotta do
this
it.
weekend I painted my doors like this
Ooh.
charcoal, like black gray.
Mm.
I saw it and I was like, I'm just doing it. And Chandler wanted Barbie pink on the inside of her door. So her door is like Wednesday Addams and Barbie. It's pink on the inside and
I
black on
love
the
that.
outside. And I was like, moody and magical. And she's like, I love it. I love it.
Oh, that's
No.
awesome.
Yeah. So that was my
Yes.
luteal phase.
Luteal
Like,
phase projects for the win.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Luteal phase projects. Like if you haven't started, well, what hopefully I explain, at least in part of this episode and my explanation of FAM, can actually help you get to this point where you know enough about your body and how you feel and how you act and when you're actually in your luteal phase, so that you can do this too. And, you know, this is just one podcast episode, and I will probably say this again later. There's no way that I can teach you how to use the fertility awareness method in one podcast episode. If you are interested in learning specifically how to use it, ask us, send us a message, an email, and we'll hook you up. But what I do hope to kind of share is just a little bit of the background, because some people get fertility awareness method confused with other things, or it gets like a bad rap because people don't really understand it. And then I hope to kind of go through some of the major pieces that you can start to practice and observe right now so that you become what we like to call a really good cycle scientist. And then once you master these observations and how to track them, it's an easy jump to being able to use them to understand when you're fertile and when you're not, because fun fact, you cannot get pregnant every day of your menstrual cycle. If anybody ever told you that, they were lying. You cannot.
And I think the reason
wait.
that like doctors say that is because they don't trust women to understand their fertility signs. And it's like not an intentional top of mind like distrust. It's just like they kind of just don't think we're like with it enough to understand the signs. And because so many women have a lack of understanding, they think they're irregular when they are not. And so that can either further complicate it. So it's almost just like, I don't want you to sue me for malpractice later. So I'm just going to tell you that you can get pregnant every single day of the cycle, just so like you can't get pissed off at me.
Well, yeah.
But
and
not
young
true.
girls,
it's just
they're young menstruators. They're just trying to scare you into not being promiscuous, which is just a load of BS. But anyway,
The patriarchy.
I'm so
excited.
Yes,
Jump in.
Yeah, so I have some notes. So
pen.
if you see me like kind of looking off to the side, it's because sometimes when I'm on the spot, I will fully admit I get tongue tied or my brain like goes blank. So I wrote notes. So I'm referring to the notes, and I'm giving you permission to do that in life, because that's what teleprompters are for. Like nobody's memorizing anything anymore. But just a little bit of background and kind of how long fertility awareness has been around. It was actually in the 1920s that two scientists who were working independently from each other, but they actually had like the same discovery around the same time. They discovered that ovulation occurs on average 14 days before the first day of menstruation. So that's where we get that idea that the period is 28 days long, but it's not always the case. But this was in the 1920s. So 100 years ago, scientists were already looking at this stuff. And then that led to another doctor developing formulas a woman or a person with a period could use to predict the fertile time in their cycle based on their previous cycle. This was in 1932. And it's what we would call a calendar-based method, where it's just based off of your history of cycles and looking at like the dates on the calendar, like counting them off. At the time, it was one of the most effective forms of family planning available because hormonal contraceptives hadn't been invented yet. So it was revolutionary at the time. Now we know that calendar-based methods are not actually that effective because it doesn't take into account that parts of our cycles are variable. But it was also in the 1930s that physician scientists were researching the role of basal body temperature. This is your resting body temperature, and realizing its use as a method of natural family planning. And then in the 1950s, scientists started to realize and pay attention to the essential role of cervical fluid or cervical mucus in regards to reproductive health, and how there are different types of cervical mucus produced depending on the influencing hormone. And that, so in the 1950s, we already know so much more about what's going on internally throughout the menstrual cycle. And it was kind of these discoveries that really laid the foundation for the development of our modern methods of fertility awareness. And I will include a link to a more robust history of fertility awareness-based methods in the show notes. But I just think that's so cool that we've literally, this is 100 years in the making. This is not something new. It's not something made up. It is firmly rooted in scientific observation. And when we talk about modern fertility awareness methods, we're not talking about the calendar method where you're just kind of using a formula on a calendar. And we're not talking about the rhythm method where you're literally just counting days off of a 28-day cycle. I don't recommend either of those things. Modern fertility awareness-based methods are rooted in tangible and observable changes in your body. And all you have to do is learn to pay attention and how to track them. But again, we're not taught this at an early age, or at least we weren't. Hopefully, our future menstruators, they're going to have such a leg up. So what are some of these observable changes? Well, your period is one of them. Changes in your cervical mucus or fluid and your vaginal sensation with that. Changes in your basal body temperature. And changes in your hormone levels were the ones that I was going to talk about today, at least a little bit. There are other body signs or biomarkers that you can use to, again, just collect data about your menstrual cycle. But those are some of the bigger ones. So we'll start with just paying attention to your period, not just the day it starts and the day it ends, but considering both the qualities of it, like what color is it? Are there big amounts of tissue in it? Is it thick or thin? Because there's other fluids, other bodily substances in there with menstrual blood and tissue. And then if you can, actually do a little bit of math and figure out for real if it's light, medium, or heavy. Because for a lot of people, that's subjective. But there are some stats out there that we can use to determine based off of, most people, is my period actually light, medium, or heavy? Because having a really light or a really heavy period can be indicative of something else. So it's important to kind of have a good idea. And I won't go through all of the numbers right here, but I will include a little reference document for you that you can just pull up and, keep it with whatever notebook or keep it as a note on your phone so that you can refer back to it as you're, paying attention to your period. And it really is, it's pretty easy to do if you use a cup or a disc. Some of them actually have number measurements on them. If they don't, you can just take your cup or disc and take a little like medicine cup and figure out like how many mLs does it hold. And then that's just something that you know, and when you take it out to change it, you can get like an estimate of, you know, how much menstrual flow am I actually losing. And there are a lot of reasons that you would want to pay attention to this, but the biggest one is that your period is actually the report card for the ovulation cycle that happened before. Because if you don't ovulate, you're not actually having a period. It's something else. And you want to be ovulating because that's a vital sign. Your menstrual cycle as a whole is a vital sign. So that's where I would start with your period. Qualities and quantities. Very important. Any questions so far?
Yeah, can you break it down for us? Because I know the answer, but just in case someone else doesn't know the answer. No. Let's say I am tracking ovulation and I'm not I didn't ovulate, but I still bled. Why? Why might that happen?
It could be like breakthrough bleeding. It could be that if you haven't ovulated
and break
yet,
that down, what that means, because that sounds kind of weird. What does it mean, breakthrough?
Breakthrough bleeding. So basically it means that you've most likely had a lot of endometrial buildup and your hormones are at a point where you still haven't ovulated, but it's enough to trigger some shedding, but it's not going to be a full period. Does that help answer the question?
Yep. Yeah. I think that's a good working definition, because it just sounds weird for people. Like, what do you mean breakthrough bleeding?
And just I've put the caveat in here. If you are taking a hormonal method of contraception that impedes your ability to ovulate, and that is how most of them work, you are not actually having a period. You're having what's known as a withdrawal bleed, and that's just an effect, especially if you do the placebo pills of the drop in synthetic hormones that you experience. They baked that into the drug so that people wouldn't freak out about not having a period, but it's not a real period. So that is important to know. I get that question a lot. And then, of course, like some people will have a little bit of bleeding around ovulation as well. That can be totally normal. But again, it's just something that you want to observe. Make sure you're taking notes throughout your cycle.
And so your day one is like that first full solid bleed.
Yes, and correct. So that would be the first day of your cycle, is the first day of observable, like full flow. Anything before that, like spotting, is the cycle before. That's a good point.
Gotcha.
All right. So the next body sign, pardon me, that is probably the most important if you're going to be paying attention to a fertility sign, is your cervical mucus or fluid and vaginal sensation. I think the vaginal sensation gets left out a lot, but it's just as important, because your vaginal sensation will also change based off of the hormone that's dominant and producing more of the cervical mucus that you observe. So cervical mucus is a fluid that is produced in your cervix, and there are different types that are produced based off of whatever hormone is dominant. So your body's producing all of them all the time, but as your hormones ebb and flow throughout your cycle, you're going to be producing more of one kind versus more of another. And there's two dominant kinds. There's estrogen dominant and there's progesterone dominant. We can go through the whole what estrogen and progesterone do in another podcast, because that's going to take up a lot of time. But just know that estrogen is what creates the cervical mucus, or what prompts your body to create the cervical mucus that you tend to notice when you're paying attention to your menstrual cycle. And it happens as you're approaching ovulation, where things all of a sudden start to feel maybe more moist down there than before. And then all of a sudden, the term that we like to use and giggle about is, all of a sudden when you go to the bathroom and you wipe, it feels like a slip and slide. And you're like, what is going on? Am I like leaking water? What's happening? No, your body is producing very estrogen dominant cervical mucus, and it is a sign that you're approaching ovulation. So with fertility awareness, what becomes very important is learning to identify what we call, at least in the method that I teach, We call it the point of change. And that is the point in your cycle where you notice an observable shift from what is most likely dryness to something that might be a sign of estrogen. So whether it's moist all of a sudden, or you see clear, stretchy, or lubricative cervical mucus. That's called your point of change. And that is one of the biggest skills you have to learn if you want to use fertility awareness method successfully, is understanding how to identify your point of change. And so from the point of change on, you'll most likely notice increasing levels of estrogen dominant cervical mucus. And then all of a sudden you won't. You will notice, an observable change where it starts to either back down to maybe just moist with no cervical mucus, or you might notice that all of a sudden the cervical mucus you see like is becoming more like tacky or like glue-like or cloudy. And this is a sign that progesterone is starting to be produced in increasing levels, and it is making, so your body's starting to make more progesterone dominant cervical mucus. Because what happens after you ovulate is your body starts producing more progesterone, and that thick progesterone dominant cervical mucus basically forms a plug, and it's very thick, and that's why you don't usually see it, and you just have this experience of dryness. That's a sign that progesterone is more dominant, and at that point you can understand that you're in your luteal phase, you are past ovulation. And so that's what I was talking about. Like, you can use your cervical mucus to understand the best time to deep clean your house or redecorate or do a luteal phase project. If you learn to understand about when you ovulate, you can plan accordingly, which is just so cool. So cool.
Love it.
I don't know if you're going to go into this, but I think like the point of change is super important, because that mucus can keep sperm alive, right? So
Correct.
even if you're days away, is this next? I
didn't actually put notes down, but so that's why I was like, let's leave it open for questions, because that's why I have you two, to make sure we talk about all the important things. But yes.
Yeah, because the egg is only alive for a little bit of time, like 24 hours.
Correct.
But if you have that mucus and you have unprotected sex, you can still get pregnant up to 5 days later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you have any estrogen dominant cervical mucus floating around in there, it changes the pH of your vagina so that sperm can stay alive, because without that, your body's literally an inhospitable environment to sperm. They don't want them. And that plug that forms in your body is it's part of your immune system, which I think is really cool. And it's there to help keep microbes and other things from getting into your body. But it's also there to be like, no sperm. You can't come in now. There's no egg for you. Yes. And that's why it's super important. And that is how people get pregnant when they're on their period, because they don't understand their point of change. And it is possible for you to have your point of change while you're on your period.
Because you have a long period, right? So you may have like a 7 or 8 day period, and you had your point of change on day 8, and you had the cervical mucus while you're still technically bleeding a little bit, and then you're like, I got pregnant on my period. Well, like maybe you just had some like leftover spotting far out. You had your point of change the same day. Correct. So you couldn't maybe see the cervical fluid. It's not common, but it does happen.
Yes. Yeah. But that's people. I was like, can you get pregnant on your period? I'm like, you can. It's not common, but this is why we need to be paying attention. And, just like my parents always told me growing up, just don't be stupid. A lot of times people are.
The point of change is it a window or is it an event?
Usually the point of change is one event, and it opens. It's what we would consider the opening of your fertile window.
Okay. So when it goes from dry to slip and slide, goes back to dry or sticky, then shop's closed.
Yes. Different people experience the shifts differently, and that's why it's so important to like pay attention and track a couple cycles before. Again, like this is why this is not nobody should go and try to use the fertility awareness method after listening to this podcast. But yes, more or less, the point of change is like the opening, and then when you notice the change back, we do what we call and when I teach people, there's what we call your peak day, which is like your last day of I am fertile. And then you notice that change back and you do a count of 3 days if you're just using cervical mucus. And at that point, you can, I don't want to say assume, but you can have the understanding that because the egg only lives for up to 24 hours, even if you don't ovulate on that like peak day of peak cervical mucus, you did it someday in the 6-day window, either 3 days before or 3 days after. And then you can understand that by that 4th day, you're like, there's nothing left. The egg is gone. I'm infertile until the next cycle. Yeah.
So interesting.
And except for I call it the shop close. You said the opposite so for me, I don't want to get pregnant. So I say the shop closes and then the shop is reopened. So that's that's how I think about it. Because I'm like, this means that we're in the could get pregnant zone. So the shop is closed.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe the factory closes. The shop is okay. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so I take my basal body temp every morning.
So that was the next one. So
okay, go.
Oh yeah, I'm gotcha.
Wait, before we go there, I want to talk about this vaginal sensation because I have never heard anyone talk about that. But like sex feels better when you're around the fertile window. For me, like the vaginal sensation changes tremendously.
Yes.
And I think that is a point of conflict, especially in long-term relationships, that we don't really understand how to like live within, because like it also those hormones mess with your libido. So with men being a more consistent every single day libido, I think that has and does cause conflict. It's something we hear about. People write in, talk about it. Myself, it's been a challenge, especially post children. It's just like our libidos are so different, and especially like my libido is highest in the time where I don't want to get pregnant.
Yes, that's why I sent that emoji when I asked, am I ovulating? Right. I was like, damn it! And you were like, what's that face for? I'm like, because I'm horny as hell.
Yeah, super horny, but I also don't want to be pregnant. And so like we know, but like because this is our I don't even trust barrier methods. It's just like avoidance, which I know there are other things, but it's like all I want to do is have sex with my husband during that time. It's just like your like body's trying to trap you into making more people. Like your body.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's just when it's nature. When we are most capable of creating humans, our body is going to give us all the tools that we need to do that.
Yes.
But yes,
these women that can't figure out how to just keep getting pregnant. I'm like, because that's when you're horniest and the cutest, and the guys know it and you know it, and there you go.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so I think,
and everybody has to make those decisions for themselves. In our house, we use a barrier method, and we're just very communicative about where I'm at, and making sure we use said barrier methods according to like the rules of the road. Like, again, don't be stupid. I know that sounds harsh, but so many people are like, oh, it's okay. And I'm like, it should absolutely be okay. Unfortunately, we don't live in a world that takes care of you, even if you're trying to do all the right things that they've told you to do. But then when accidents happen, and there is no method of birth control that is 100% effective except for abstinence. And I'm sorry, but that's just no way to live, unless that is like, that's for you. But that is no way to live. So, I mean, like, we're all on the same page that like in our lifetime, we want to see that change.
Yeah.
Like reproductive care is healthcare. If you don't want to have a kid, it's okay. And we shouldn't be.
I don't want you to have a kid if you don't want a kid. Let's just start there.
Yeah.
It's hard enough when
it's so much work.
So much work. But anyway.
It's hard.
Okay. Yes. That's
anyway.
So I just thought that was a good, like, to like say that out loud too, because I hadn't ever heard anyone say like it's also the vaginal sensation. So like just like normalizing that is part of the thing that changes. And so you're not weird if sometimes you want to have sex more than other times. That's hormonal.
That's hormonal. Yeah, that's absolutely hormonal. Not to say that you can't, work around your hormones. Like that's what foreplay is for, and like that sort of stuff. But like there are times where you're going to be in that ovulatory window and like you don't need that. You're just like, let's go. because your body is ready for it. You can thank testosterone for that. We get a little bump right in that middle of our cycle. Yeah. And that's why we get it, to hopefully continue our species. But anyway, Anna, to your point, I will now add the basal body temperature layer on to this. And your basal body temperature, like I said at the top of the episode, it's your resting body temperature. So it's basically your body temperature when you've been resting for a while. For most of us, that's when we're asleep. So the way that most people have observed this over the years is with a thermometer, where like as soon as their eyeballs open in the morning, they stick a thermometer under their tongue and they just try to move as little as possible while the thermometer checks their temperature. And that has worked for many people for a very long time. There are other ways to observe it now, where you can wear a device, whether it's like an Oura Ring or a temp drop. Those things exist now too. But the point of observing your basal body temperature over the course of your cycle is that after ovulation, when your body starts producing, much more progesterone, progesterone is because it's progestation, and it produces an increase in your basal body temperature. You will actually be running a little bit warmer, and you can see that shift in temperature. It's sustained. And just like when you observe that, downgrade in your cervical mucus, when you observe that increase in your basal body temperature, you can use that as a sign that you've ovulated. So that's how basal body temperature is helpful. And basal body temperature is also good to just keep track of, because we want to be running at a certain temperature all the time. So it's just also a nice piece, especially as we're all getting older and we might have like thyroid issues or other things going on. Mm-hmm. It's just a good thing to keep tabs on, because changes in your basal body temperature, just like other things, can be indicative of other things that are going on in your body, which I just think is really cool. But the thing with basal body temperature is, because I know that there are products on the market that say all you need to do is check your temperature every morning, and that's how you'll know when you're fertile and when you're not. That sounds great. And I understand the need, want, desire for it to be that simple. I don't recommend using one of those devices on their own. The only way to know when your fertile window opens is by tracking your cervical mucus. And without that, these algorithms, that's what they're using. They're formulas again, with these, devices that are just checking your temperature. They can't take into account human variability. If you get sick, your basal body temperature becomes not very accurate. Some of these devices, like a temp drop, they're like, don't wear it if you have a fever. It's not designed for that. So then you can't use it. It can't, this thermometer can't tell if you had a stressful week at work and you delayed your ovulation. So if you're going to use something, I don't want to name any names, so I don't want to get in trouble. If you have questions about it, you can send us an email or a message on Instagram. I think they're great. Keep using them, but add in cervical mucus observations if you really want to protect yourself and use fertility awareness method accurately.
Well, what kinds of things can mess with your cervical mucus? Like, what if I'm taking a ton of Benadryl, or I'm not sleeping? Is that going to mess up my
antihistamines? Can, if they can medicine. Dry up fluid in your body, they can dry up fluid in your cervix, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't ovulate.
Yeah. So you got to do all the things.
You have, I think people should just do all the things. Like, I'm at the point where obviously these different fertility awareness methods want to train instructors on how to teach their fertility awareness method. But that's just an example of the educational, capitalistic complex where it's I get it, but really we should just be tracking all these things because they're all saying the same thing. You're all tracking the same thing. The science is the same for all of them. So yeah, when I work with my clients, I know what I have my certification is, but I also know I have almost 10 years of using all of these things. And that's why I'm an effective instructor, is that I went and got schooled so I could understand the science, but I've also been doing this for a long time. And I only have the one kid I planned for. And I've never had and even if I did, then I would know and I could take care of it. What do they call it? Like, bring about my monthly courses, because that's what they called it in history. It was not a big deal. It was just like, no, I want my courses to come. That's what they called your period back in the day. Again, you would still know way before it could be a scary, tragic situation.
Yeah. I just want to put a little caveat in here for some extra clarity as we run the Agenda Period app. The Agenda Period app is in no way meant to track anything for your fertility. It is a helpful tool. So we don't use the rhythm method. We use more like the calendar method that Sarah explained. So it is an algorithm, but it is in flux because we've got a button that's like my period started early. So it updates, it changes based on what's going on, but it's not helping you track these other biomarkers. It's something we may explore in the future, but something we wanted to be really clear about when we entered the market, because so many of the products out there only focus on fertility in a lot of ways because we care more about fertile women than we care about women who are not fertile. And we place a high value on women who can make more humans as the thing that is most valuable about them in our society. And so as a complete fuck you and middle finger to that notion, we were really clear that this was not a fertility solution because we
have a baby. It's not about that.
Because this is about your health and wellness, irregardless if you ever want to make more people. This is about you understanding these hormonal signs for your own creativity, for your own brilliance, for your own big, bold work in the world. And so the Agenda Period is not a form of birth control. We're not looking at that for the FDA. We're not trying to go after that kind of certification. So we do use, if you're curious and you're an app user, it's the calendar method that changes with an algorithm that changes if you change information in there with the intention to not be fertility, because we want it to be about like you caring for yourself, which fertility is part of that, but we don't have a big focus on like knowing when you're pregnant. So don't use it as your form of birth control.
No,
like,
don't
put that on us. This is not that.
No.
This is about your own cyclical well-being. And then you can use some of these additional FAM tools to work with that structure that we've created. And that's what all of us independently do. We all use the app, but then we also have, like, I'm a big Billings girl. Like, the billing method is my ride or die. Like, I'm all about the cervical mucus tracking. I'm very in tune with that. I think Anna uses a lot of the basal body temperature. Sarah does a little bit of everything. And so I just wanted to put that in here. And I almost should have said it at the top of the episode, but like, use these tools with an app, but don't count on any app ever for your only method of birth control. None of them are accurate enough.
No, there is an app that I recommend to people who need it, who want to chart, is what I teach people to do. We're actually doing this on a chart. There's only one app that I would ever tell somebody to use. And if you ever do want to work with me as part of the agenda, we offer Fertility Awareness Method Education via me, but coaching, separate from the app.
Yeah.
There's only one app, and it's literally, there's no predicting. It looks like a piece of paper. It's just on your phone. Because you have to determine these things for yourself. I don't think people should be doing Fertility Awareness Method or using an app as
you should link
control.
that one too. It's called Read Your Body, right?
Yeah, I didn't want to.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's free. It's a nonprofit. It's also off the cloud, so super highly ethical. They don't track everything is stored locally onto your phone. So if you wipe the app, they have no backup for you because they're super down to ride for feminist cause. So I am a big fan of Read Your Body. So
that's what I use. That's one I use. I've been using it for years. Because it's a nonprofit, it's not actually free, but if you work with me, I can get you 3 months free subscription. Like, that's something I'm allowed to offer to my clients. Cool. But it's really reasonable. Like, for a whole year, it's absolutely worth it. And it doesn't matter what method of fertility awareness method you ultimately use, because they have created options for all of them. Like, they are equal FAM players, which, just mad shout out to them. I think what they're doing is great.
Yeah.
But those are my two.
Because the cervical fluid Billings, I don't know what that Billings is, but I think it has to do with the cervical fluid. It sounds so intimidating
only. Yeah.
Like, what? Am I overthinking this? Like, now I just text y'all. I'm like, okay, there was just like a splash in my underwear. Like, am I ovulating? Like, what did that mean?
So here's the thing I tell people. It's like, so when I teach someone fertility awareness method, the very first cycle, you're not using it as birth control. I don't really recommend doing that until you've done this for at least 3 cycles and you're using a separate form or abstaining during your fertile window. But it is literally impossible not to notice what your point of change feels like. The more that you like, just as you wipe, consider the sensation when you wipe front to back, and like, is there anything on the tissue paper? Like, it is impossible not to notice these changes if you can just get yourself in the habit
once you start to notice
of observing them. So this is like, I've said this before on this podcast, but this quote lives in my brain all the time. It's from Lisa Hendrickson Jack. Like, it's not rocket science, but because we have been taught that our bodies are bad, like, how could you possibly, one, be that self-centered? I get into the etymology of that whole word later. That you would be paying that much attention to yourself every day. Like, I can't do that. I can't give myself that much time and care. Bullshit. So that's like a whole other thing we're kind of like fighting with when we're teaching people how to pay this much attention to your own body and to trust your own body. Like,
I also kind of think it's like the slug bug, right? Once you decided you're playing slug bug in the car with your siblings, when you're like, you start seeing them all over the place just because like you have a reason to punch somebody, right? It's like whatever you train your brain to focus on, your brain will focus on. So like, I
call a punch buggy. Sorry,
slug bugs. Yeah.
Do you call a VW bug?
Yeah, slug bug.
Wow. So I'm from the East Coast. Now I just have a total, I've never heard that before. Sorry. I was just like, wait a minute. What?
That's from the Midwest. I don't know what Anna calls them. If she calls them slug bugs.
Punch bug or slug bug. Yeah. I've lived everywhere.
All right. Anyway.
Well, so slugging somebody when you see a bug.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And I would like get my brother so good.
You had to have your knuckle out. Yeah.
Exactly. So like, once you've decided you're going to pay attention to it, as soon as you wipe, I know, and I like what the thing is, or even like I see like, even if I have like a microscopic little spotting, I will notice it because I am paying attention to it.
But I notice it, but you, Sarah, I didn't know what I was noticing. Like, I didn't know what that told me about my body. And so, yeah, I can feel the slip and slide. I can feel the splash. But what does that mean? That means that for these, and then like the
maybe
next
we should
day
also like try to do some pictures in the show notes, like to show, because there's some good to like actually show what it looks like.
Yeah,
like when someone kept saying, oh, go ahead.
I was like, I know there's a website that has a ton of
pictures. We can link that.
Yeah, I will.
Because at first when I heard egg white cervical mucus, I don't know why. I know what raw egg whites look like, but I thought it was supposed to be white, like a cooked egg white. And I was like, I don't have anything that looks like that. I don't understand what this means. They meant raw egg whites, but I guess that, I don't know. Because like, so instantly I was just thinking of like a chunky white thing. I was like,
no, if that's coming out, that's not usually a good sign.
That's a situation. But yeah, naming conventions and understanding, like,
that's why it's hard. Yeah, we like it makes it harder than it should be. So we can link some pictures. So yeah, you want to look for the raw egg white vibe, and then when it changes to get cloudy, then that's the progesterone coming on. So yeah, Billings method is my method.
Yeah,
I'm Billings girl.
So the last one that I just wanted to layer on is luteinizing hormone, or LH test strips, or often also called ovulation predictor kits. They're widely available. Yep. Ovulation predictor is a little bit misleading in that it cannot, these little strips that you ultimately pee on are measuring an increase in something called luteinizing hormone that your brain produces to tell your ovaries to ovulate. And so you get a rapid increase of it right before you ovulate. But it doesn't always necessarily mean you are absolutely positively going to ovulate, because your body can have multiple attempts at ovulation in any given cycle. But again, it's another piece of this puzzle that when layered on with your cervical mucus observations and or your basal body temperature can help confirm what you're seeing in your body. And so they are very effective for people who are trying to conceive, in that it can help give them like that really good window of before ovulation, because it can actually be more effective to have intercourse before you actually ovulate. So the sperm are like ready and waiting.
Time. Yeah.
Then, you know, right at the same time or
They're
even
lined
after.
up outside the club.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But it is also an effective tool for understanding, like, okay, well, my luteinizing hormone, I had a positive test. It reached this threshold and I had my peak day of cervical mucus and now things are dropping back off. That luteinizing hormone test is another indication that, oh yeah, I ovulated. And again, you can use like a certain amount of time after that with your cervical mucus observations to understand that you probably ovulated and you've entered the non-fertile section of your cycle. But luteinizing hormone tests don't work for everyone. They can be particularly challenging for people who have PCOS because a lot of times PCOS causes you to make a lot of estrogen and have those repeated attempts at ovulation throughout your cycle. But if you've never tried them before, whether to get pregnant or not, I think they're very worth checking out and just seeing what your body's telling you. Most of them will tell you to start on like a certain day of your cycle. I don't agree with any of them. If you're going to try luteinizing hormone tests as a term for helping you understand when you're fertile, start on that point of change day. Don't wait for an arbitrary day in your cycle because everybody's cycles is different. Whenever you notice your point of change, that's the day that you'll just start taking an LH test every day just to see what happens. It's going to make you a better cycle scientist collecting this data about yourself.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
So there are, of course, other things that you can pay attention to. Changes in your cervix occur. There are other things that you might experience throughout your cycle, like certain symptoms or breast tenderness, or when we have different like days of different moods. Those are all very valuable pieces of data to collect about yourself. And we will link back to the episode we've already done about just the cycle check-in, where you're just kind of checking in where your, you know, heart, mind, and soul are every day. And when you combine these two, it's going to paint a really robust picture of what's going on in your body. And then as you do this over time, you'll start to notice patterns. And then you can start to understand, like, well, I usually feel like crap on day X, Y, or Z. I don't have to plan stuff on that day. Or I know I usually feel great around ovulation. Let's make all the plans. And this is where, like, again, with the agenda period, the app, and understanding some of this more physical stuff, they are two separate pieces of the puzzle. But I think combined, man, do they really, it will really change your life. For like lack of a better way to put it, because this episode is already way longer than any of the other ones.
No, I mean, it's game changer. Yes, it's game changer.
Yeah.
It's so empowering as a woman to know, like, my body is telling me all these things. It's sending out all these signals for me to just pay attention to. Like, I don't have to, it's not rocket science, like you just said.
No,
and like these things this is our physical, biological reality. So you can either continue to pretend that it's not happening and hate your body and hate your life and fight yourself and get pissed off all the time. Or the easier alternative is actually just to learn about it. And like, then these things, like, it sounds very time intensive. And it was at the beginning. It took a lot of time for me to figure out, and the moods and the tracking and the things. But like Sarah mentioned, that 3 months, that's what I tell clients all the time. About those first 3 months of tracking consistently, you get into a rhythm where you understand yourself, you understand. And then if you get off track, you can recalibrate super quickly. So like, let's see, would I rather invest 3 months of my life or keep feeling miserable for the next 20, 30, 40 years, however many years you have left of menstruating?
Yeah, and we do this with everything else in our life. Like, we know here in Texas it doesn't get cold until Halloween, so we don't even bring our jackets out until then. And these are just things that we've noticed and observed, and we react accordingly. It doesn't have to be that time consuming. We just, as women, I guess, just as people, make observations about our life and adjust accordingly. We're good at that. So be good at it for yourself.
Just take some small observations, put your cycle scientist hat on, and then adjust accordingly. And we are here to help you every step of the way. And I think we're going to have a FAM 2.0, because I still think there are like questions and things.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll put it out there. Like, after this episode airs, we'll put it out there, and like people can have any questions. Yeah, I want to hear them.
I could talk about this all day with you, Sarah. I'm like, but then this one time Yeah.
Oh my gosh. No, I love talking about this. I have friends who are like, they'll start and I'll be like, or am I bothering you? And be like, this is literally my favorite thing to talk about. Aside from books, like I could talk about fam,
books and fam.
books and fam. And then if you want next time, we can also talk about books about fam.
Yay. Awesome. Well, thank you all for coming back to another episode of the FYP cast. We hope that this was informative. Literally, I have so many notes for myself. So thank you, Sarah, for leading the charge on this conversation. And we will see you all next time.